In a heartbeat, my world shattered. One moment, I'm smiling under a cascade of fairy tale confetti. The next, my fiancé's words slice through the air, "I can't marry you." As tears blur my vision, a text lights up my phone from a man I barely know, a billionaire with a reputation for cold deals and colder hearts. He's offering me everything I ever dreamed of: love, security, a life beyond my wildest hopes. Can I trust him when my first love abandoned me at the altar? Journey with me from devastation to discovery, from lonely hotel lobbies to moonlit yachts, as I learn that sometimes the greatest love stories bloom from the ashes of heartbreak. Before we start the story, leave a comment to let us know which city you're watching from. Like and subscribe to support our community. Your support means a lot to us. Now, enjoy the story as we continue. The morning air was crisp as I stepped into the antique chapel, its stained glass windows painting the aisle with ribbons of color. My heart pounded like church bells in my chest. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My wedding day with Andrew, my college sweetheart. I buttoned the sleeve of my lace gown, smoothing its delicate fringe, and took a slow breath. Everything would be perfect. Andrew and I met under a canopy of orange trees during freshman orientation. He was shy and thoughtful. I was loud and optimistic. We fit together like mismatched puzzle pieces, each filling the other's gaps. Over the years, we built dreams. Cozy mornings sipping coffee in our kitchen, Sunday drives with the windows down, late-night whispers about the future. He asked me to marry him under that same orange tree 2 summers ago, and I said yes without hesitation. Yet today felt different. As I walked down the aisle, I noticed Andrew's jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on a point beyond me. His best man, his brother Leo, gave me a polite nod that trembled in uncertainty. The pastor's voice echoed through the room, welcoming friends and family. Guests smiled, but I sensed an undercurrent, a ripple of something unspoken. It made my stomach churn. I reached the altar, my steps slower now. Andrew slipped my trembling hand into his, and I felt his palms slick with sweat. He looked into my eyes, those warm brown windows I'd stared into for years, and his face shifted. Confusion flickered, then something heavier. Fear. The pastor asked if any had reasoned this union should not be, and I braced for Leo or my mother to step forward. Instead, Andrew took a breath I recognized too well, one of hesitation. "I'm sorry," he said, voice unsteady. "I can't do this." My heart splintered. The camera flashes and gasps echoed, but I heard only the sudden snap of my dreams. Andrew released my hand and stepped back. My father opened his mouth to scold, to plead, to demand explanations. But I stood rooted, numb. The aisle felt miles long as I turned and walked back, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the spring breeze bit at my cheeks. I clutched my bouquet, its petals damp with more than morning dew. My mother hurried to my side, arms trembling around me. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice cracking. I pressed my face into her shoulder, tasting tears and regret. The crowd dispersed like startled birds, leaving only a sea of confusion and pity behind. In that moment, I vowed I would not dissolve into this heartbreak. I promised myself I would stand tall, even if my legs wobbled. But as I watched Andrew's figure blur into the distance, every ounce of confidence drained away. I was alone, and my perfect promise lay broken on the chapel floor. The chauffeur's door closed with a soft click, and the black sedan glided away from the chapel. I stood on the curb in my wedding dress, the train of lace pooling around my feet like a shattered dream. My mother hovered beside me, pale and trembling, but I felt nothing beyond a cold numbness. Leo had gone back inside to retrieve our bags, and I watched his retreating silhouette, wondering if any comfort could ever reach me now. Mom led me to her car in silence. She tried to speak, offered tissues, gentle words, but I barely registered them. Each word felt like it echoed from some other world, a world where I was not the abandoned bride trudging through the spring gloom. At home, I would have been swarmed with calls, messages, perhaps pitying friends. But today, I longed only for a moment alone, away from all eyes that knew my story. That night, I checked into the downtown hotel we'd booked for our honeymoon. The suite was as lavish as any fairy tale room, all champagne flutes and silk sheets, but it felt hollow. I peeled off my gown, letting it fall in a crumpled heap on the marble floor. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands twisting the engagement ring until it slipped off my finger. I held it up to the lamp, its diamond facets catching light like tiny stars. How could something so beautiful have brought me only pain? My phone lay on the nightstand, blinking silently. I had ignored it all day, afraid of every name that might flash on the screen. Then, just as I pulled the pillow over my head, it lit up again. A message from an unknown number. I'm so sorry for what happened today. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. I sat up, heart thundering. The text came from Sebastian Cole, the billionaire tech mogul I'd met at a charity gala 6 months ago. Our interaction had been brief but memorable. He'd held the door for me, complimented my speech about women in business, and left a tip of his hat before disappearing into the crowd. I never imagined he'd remember my name, let alone check on me in my darkest hour. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did he know? Why did he care? My pride whispered that I shouldn't respond. Yet lonely tears pooled in my eyes, and I realized I needed, someone who saw me as more than a broken bride. I typed back, "Thank you. I'm not sure what to say." His reply came almost instantly, "Say whatever you want. I'm listening." His words were simple, but they felt like a lifeline. I stared at the screen, my chest tight with disbelief. All day, I'd felt invisible under the weight of my loss. Now, here was a man, a stranger, offering me compassion without judgment. I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath. A small spark of hope flickered within me. Maybe tonight, in the quiet of this unfamiliar suite, I could lean on someone new. Maybe my story wasn't over yet. Trembling, I tapped another message. "Can we talk? Just for a little while." Seconds ticked by like hours. Then at last, his response glowed beneath my thumb. "Whenever you're ready." My heart fluttered at the screen. In the darkness of my heartbreak, a new chapter was beginning, one I never saw coming. My hands shook as I pressed the little phone icon to start the call. The room hummed with the silent tick of the air conditioner, and I held my breath, waiting. After a second of silence, a warm, calm voice answered. "Hello," he said almost gently. "Hi, it's me," I whispered, suddenly feeling shy. "Hey, how are you holding up?" The question was simple, but it struck me like a splash of cold water. "Not great," I admitted. I'm a mess." He chuckled softly, not unkindly. "That's okay. You don't have to pretend." I let out a nervous laugh. "I've spent 24 hours pretending pretty well, actually." We fell into an easy rhythm, as if we were old friends catching up instead of strangers trading messages in the night. He asked about my day, and I told him everything. The ceremony, Andrew's words, the stunned faces of our families. I didn't hold back. The more I spoke, the lighter my chest felt, as though each word untied a knot inside me. "Why are you helping me?" I asked after a while, surprised at my own bluntness. There was a pause. "Because I know what it's like." His voice sounded distant, shadowed. "Last year, I lost someone important to me. Felt like my whole life had no meaning. People sent flowers and cards, but they didn't stay. They moved on. I was alone for weeks." His confession made my throat tighten. I hadn't expected him to share something so personal. "I get it," he continued. "And that night, a friend called me out of the blue. We just talked for hours. It was the first time I felt not alone." I swallowed hard. "I'm glad you called me." "Me too," he said, and there was a beat of something in his voice. Relief, maybe. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Would you mind telling me what you like to do, for yourself? Not Andrew, not your family. What makes you happy?" The question took me off guard. I thought of the way I painted watercolors, the weekends I spent hiking in the hills, the thrill of reading a novel curled up in a cafe. I love art," I said. "I used to paint every weekend. I'd give my pieces to friends or leave them in coffee shops for strangers to find." "That's beautiful," he said. "You should do that again." I bit my lip, imagining brushes gliding across a blank canvas. "I've been too busy." "Busy with what?" I hesitated, then confessed. "Trying to be perfect. Trying to be the person Andrew wanted me to be." His sigh was gentle. "You don't have to be perfect for anyone," he said firmly. "Least of all for yourself." His words resonated in the quiet room. I closed my eyes, picturing a future where I painted for joy, not to please someone else. "Thank you, Sebastian," I whispered. He laughed softly. "You're welcome. Anytime you need to talk, or to paint, call me." I smiled into the darkness. For the first time since the chapel, I felt seen. And somewhere, deep inside, I sensed the first spark of something new. Hope. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains and danced across my pillow. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Sebastian. "Coffee at Haven Cafe in 1 hour?" No pressure. My heart fluttered. Could I really face him in person? I nodded at my reflection in the mirror, eyes puffy, hair a tangled halo, but also determined. This was a turning point. I slipped into familiar jeans and a soft sweater, wiped last night's tears, and whispered, "I can do this." Haven Cafe sat on a quiet corner of the street, its blue awning promising warmth. I arrived early, the bell above the door tinkling as I stepped inside. The air smelled of fresh roast and vanilla syrup. Small tables dotted the wooden floor, each topped with a single wildflower. I chose a seat by the window, watching passers-by bundled in light jackets. My stomach churned with nerves and hope in equal measure. A gentle knock on the window startled me. There stood Sebastian, holding 2 steaming cups wrapped in paper sleeves. He wore a navy coat over a crisp white shirt, effortlessly handsome, but with kind eyes that softened his sharp jawline. He smiled when our eyes met and gave a small wave. My throat tightened. He stepped inside, his presence filling the space with calm confidence. "Good morning," he said, settling across from me. "I brought your favorite latte with oat milk, and a croissant." He slid 1 cup and the pastry toward me, nodding as if he already knew my order. I managed a shaky smile. "Thank you," I whispered, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. The steam curled into the air, carrying away some of my tension. We sipped in silence for a moment. Then Sebastian leaned forward, voice soft. "I know yesterday was hard. How are you feeling now?" I set my cup down and breathed. "Better," I said truthfully. "Talking to you helped. But meeting you in person—" My words dissolved into a nervous laugh. He offered a reassuring grin. "I'm glad you came. You're stronger than you think." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I opened my art gallery folder and showed him pictures of my watercolors. Blush rose to my cheeks as I scrolled through landscapes I'd painted last summer. "I haven't touched my brushes in months," I confessed. His eyes lit up at the vibrant colors. "These are incredible," he said. "You have real talent. Promise me you'll paint again." His encouragement felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We talked about my favorite trails for finding inspiration, and he shared stories of spontaneous road trips he'd taken to sketch old bridges. We laughed over his terrible attempt at painting a lighthouse that looked more like a totem pole. Each story wove a new thread between us, until my worries felt distant. When the second cups were empty and the croissant crumbs gone, Sebastian checked his watch. "I should let you rest," he said gently. I stood, clutching my coat. "Thank you for today," I said, voice steady. He smiled, his gaze warm. "Any time." As I walked back through the door, I felt lighter, my broken pieces held together by unexpected kindness. In that simple cafe, with morning light and a stranger's faith, I realized my heart was ready to open once more. The following afternoon, the sun was warm and high when Sebastian picked me up outside the hotel. He leaned out of the driver's window and smiled, holding 2 paint-smudged aprons in one hand. "Hop in," he said. "I thought today we'd paint together. My studio." My pulse quickened. I had never painted with anyone else watching, let alone a billionaire who could buy half the city with a snap of his fingers. His car rolled through quiet streets lined with flowering trees. I pressed my hand against the window, watching blossoms drift across the pavement like pale pink snow. Inside, Sebastian's easy chatter about his morning meetings faded into a comfortable hum. He parked in front of a low brick building tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. A small sign read Cole Creative, and beneath it, Art, Design, Inspiration. The door swung open into a wide studio filled with light. Canvases lined the walls, some large and abstract, others delicate landscapes, and in the center stood 2 easels facing each other. A long table held brushes, tubes of paint, and jars of water. The air smelled of turpentine and fresh linen. I wasn't kidding when I said I paint, Sebastian laughed, handing me an apron. I come here to think. He tied the strings around my waist and then clipped one around his own. I felt strangely at ease, as if we were two friends on a shared adventure rather than a wounded bride and her unexpected savior. He set my easel beside a tall window overlooking a small courtyard. Pick a canvas, he encouraged, pointing to a row of blank white squares. I chose a medium-sized one and turned to him. What should I paint? Whatever speaks to you, he replied, dipping his brush into a pool of cerulean. For me, today is about new beginnings. I closed my eyes and let my mind drift back to the cafe, to the way the sunlight caught in his hair, to how safe I'd felt in his company. Slowly, I brought my brush to the canvas and made a single sweeping stroke of soft blue. It was shaky at first, but with each movement, my confidence grew. I painted the sky of my childhood, wide, open, and full of possibility. Sebastian watched me quietly, then turned to his own canvas. He painted a single, strong tree standing against a blank horizon. Your sky needs a tree, he said without looking up. I laughed and added a slender trunk beneath my blue heavens, then dabbed at green leaves. We painted side by side, sharing brushes and stories. He told me why he opened this studio, to find peace outside spreadsheets and conference rooms. I spoke of my first art show, a small gallery where my mother had surprised me by buying my favorite piece. As I spoke, I realized how much joy painting had always given me. Joy that I had buried under wedding plans and other people's expectations. When we finally stepped back, our canvases were half-formed but alive with color. Sebastian nodded at mine. It's beautiful, he said softly. My heart swelled at his praise. Outside, the sky was turning pink and gold. We cleaned our brushes in silence, each of us savoring the peace that followed creation. As I hung up my apron, I felt a stirring of something gentle and real. In that studio, among spilled paint and shared laughter, I understood. Heartbreak had brought me here, but art, and him, were showing me how to heal. That evening, Sebastian surprised me with another invitation. He texted, "Meet me at the Skyview penthouse in 1 hour. Dress comfortably." My heart skipped. I'd never been to a billionaire's home, let alone one overlooking the city lights. I slipped into a simple navy dress, tied my hair back, and tried to calm my nerves. The elevator ride to the penthouse was quiet, the walls lined with modern art that reminded me of our afternoon in the studio. When the doors opened, I stepped into a grand living room bathed in warm light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city's skyline, each building twinkling like a galaxy of fireflies. A long table was set for two, candles flickering beside delicate china plates. "Welcome," Sebastian said, appearing from the kitchen with a gentle smile. He wore a relaxed sweater and jeans, familiar, still elegant. "I hope you like Italian." I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. He poured us wine, light rose that glowed pink in the glass. "To new friends," he toasted, and I raised my glass. I sipped, the crisp taste dancing on my tongue, and felt a sense of possibility bloom in my chest. Over dinner, Sebastian shared stories of his childhood home by the coast, where every sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues. He described running along the beach with his sisters, their laughter carried by sea breeze. "Art was my escape," he said, setting down his fork. "I used to sketch the waves until my fingers turned blue." I smiled at the image of him as a boy, scavenging seashells and blue-stained fingers. Then he asked about my family. I told him about my parents' small art gallery, how they nurtured my dream from the day I first held a paintbrush. My voice grew soft as I remembered my mother's proud smile at my first gallery opening. "She cried," I admitted. "Happy tears." He reached across the table and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. His touch was warm, grounding me. "You deserve that joy," he said. "And more." His eyes held a depth of sincerity that made my chest ache. For dessert, he brought out homemade tiramisu, light and fluffy. As I tasted the creamy sweetness, I felt my walls crumble a bit more. Here was someone who saw me, beyond the heartbreak and the high society whispers. He saw my passion, my scars, my hopes. After dinner, we moved to the balcony. The night air smelled of jasmine, and below us the city pulsed with life. Sebastian leaned against the railing, pulling me close. I know we've only known each other a short time, he said, voice low. But I've never felt so connected to anyone. My heart thundered. I turned to him, breathless. I feel it too, I whispered. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. When you're ready, I want to show you more of my world, and have you in mine. Standing there, under a blanket of stars and city lights, I realized this chapter of my life was far from over. It was just beginning, and I was ready to turn the page. Morning light filtered through my curtains, drawing me out of a dream where Andrew stood at the altar again. I blinked it away and smiled at Sebastian's text, "Breakfast in the sky, see you at 8." My heart fluttered with excitement and nerves. Today I would see more of his world. I chose a soft blouse and slacks, something comfortable yet neat. As I stepped into the penthouse kitchen, Sebastian greeted me with 2 plates of fresh fruit, Greek yogurt, and honey on the marble island. Behind him, the city spread out like a map of glittering lights and streets. "Good morning," I said, taking a seat at the high stool. The view took my breath away. "You live so high up." He poured fresh coffee. "It helps keep perspective. You can't get lost in the noise up here." He slid a cup across. "Try this, Kenyan roast." The coffee was bright and smooth, waking me fully. We ate in comfortable silence, sharing the quiet hum of the city below. Then, he slid his phone across to me, an invitation to a charity gala tonight, hosted by one of his foundations. "It's black tie," he said. "I'd love for you to join me." My stomach fluttered. I had never been to a black tie event. I'd love to," I managed. "You'll look stunning," he promised. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. I practiced walking in the heels he had delivered with a note, just in case, and tried on dresses, finally choosing a deep green gown that brought out my eyes. By evening, my mother was my hair and makeup artist, fussing over every strand and lipstick shade. At the gala, we stepped from the sleek car under a canopy of photographers. My heart pounded as flashes lit the red carpet. Sebastian gently guided me through the crowd like a seasoned host, introducing me to philanthropists, artists, and even a famous actress who complimented my dress. I heard a whisper of admiration for the new couple, and my cheeks warmed. Sebastian took my hand. "Come on," he said, leading me inside a grand ballroom hung with crystal chandeliers and bouquets of white roses. Over dinner, we listened to musicians play a gentle string quartet. Speeches thanked donors for their support of children's education and clean water projects. Sebastian's foundation funded half the work, and he stood to speak. I watched him, confident yet humble, as he talked about giving back. After the applause, he returned to my side. "Thank you for being here," he said, his voice low so only I could hear. "It means a lot." I leaned into him. "I'm honored." Later, on the balcony overlooking the gala's garden, we stood side by side. He slipped his arm around my waist. "You were perfect tonight," he whispered. I tilted my head back. I felt nervous. He kissed my temple. "You have nothing to fear here," he promised. "Not with me." I closed my eyes, feeling the warm night breeze and the gentle steady beat of his heart against mine. For the first time, I knew I belonged, not as a broken bride, but as someone loved and valued in both his world and my own. Sebastian arrived on Friday afternoon with a sporty convertible and a soft smile. "Pack a bag," he said. "We're escaping the city." My heart fluttered as I tossed essentials into a weekend tote: jeans, a cozy sweater, my favorite sketchbook. I'd never been on a spontaneous trip like this. We drove 2 hours to a countryside estate perched on rolling hills. The air smelled of pine and wildflowers. A charming stone cottage stood at the edge of a meadow, its windows reflecting the golden light. Inside, hardwood floors creaked under our feet, and a crackling fireplace filled the open living room with warmth. "This is amazing," I breathed, setting down my bag. He took my hand. "I wanted you to see where I find peace." His eyes were bright, vulnerable, away from deadlines and headlines. That evening, we walked along a wooded trail beside a bubbling stream. He pointed out deer tracks and taught me how to skip stones. I laughed when my first stone sank with a plop, but my second flew across the water like a bird. Sebastian clapped, pride shining in his eyes. I felt treasured. Back at the cottage, we cooked dinner together in the rustic kitchen. He chopped vegetables with surprising care while I stirred a pot of soup. Steam curled around us as our laughter mingled. Over simple plates of roasted chicken and potatoes, he told me stories of childhood summers spent exploring these woods with his grandmother. "She taught me to listen," he said, "to the wind, to the trees, and to my own heart." After dinner, I fetched blankets, and we settled on the porch swing. The sky was a tapestry of stars. I opened my sketchbook and began to draw the silhouette of the cottage against the moonlit hills. He watched in silence, then reached out to gently guide my hand, adding delicate strokes of white for the stars. When I looked up, he was staring at me. "You're so talented," he whispered. I blushed as my heart swelled. Just then, his phone buzzed sharply. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. "I'm sorry," he said, standing. "It's urgent." I watched him pace inside, his voice low and tense. Through the window, I saw him close off the call with a single word, "I'll handle it." He closed his eyes, running a hand through his hair, then forced a smile before returning to the porch. "Everything's fine," he said, but the worry lines on his forehead betrayed him. I nodded, though warmth drained from my cheeks. The magic of the night felt fragile now. He pulled me close, wrapping me in his arms. "I hate that work follows me everywhere," he admitted softly. "I wanted this weekend to be different." I laid my head on his shoulder. "It still is," I said, though my voice trembled. He kissed the top of my head. "Thank you for understanding. Tomorrow, let's promise each other no business. Just us." I looked up at him, hope rekindling in my chest. "I'd like that." We sat in silence, the swing gently swaying beneath a sky full of stars. For all its interruptions, this weekend had drawn me deeper into his world, and into his heart. Even if the city would call us back soon, we had found our own private constellation here, one I knew I never wanted to leave. A soft glow filtered through the cottage windows, waking me before the alarm of reality could intrude. I stirred under the heavy quilt and peeked out to see Sebastian already by the small breakfast table, 2 mugs of steaming tea before him. His hair was mussed, and he wore yesterday's sweater. He looked like comfort itself. "Morning," he whispered, standing as I slid into the chair. We clinked our mugs together, then paused to sip. The tea was minty and sweet, clearing the last remnants of sleep and worry from my mind. He studied me over his cup. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "I did," I said, and meant it. For the first time in ages, I dreamed of turning pages, of starting something new rather than replaying the broken chapter with Andrew. Sebastian smiled, folding his hands on the table. "There's no rush today," he said. "Let's stay here, just us, until the world needs us again." My heart fluttered. He sounded wistful, as though he knew every second we had was borrowed. I reached out, covering his knuckles with my hand. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," I challenged softly. He blinked, then laughed, a sound like sunrise. "Okay," he said. "I'll go first." He slid a small pouch from his coat pocket and placed it between us. I frowned in surprise. He opened it to reveal a simple silver pendant engraved with a solitary feather. "When I was a boy," he began, voice quiet, "my parents gave me this feather as a good luck charm." He traced the engraving with his fingertip. "They said it would remind me to stay grounded, even as I dreamed big." I carried it through every school play, every scholarship interview, until they passed away last year. I forgot about it until I found it last week. He looked at me, eyes shining. "I haven't shown it to anyone until now." My throat tightened. I slid the pendant from its cushion and held it in my palm. "It's beautiful," I whispered. I ran my finger over the engraving, imagining his childhood hopes tied to this tiny token. He met my gaze. "I wanted you to have it," he said, "because you've given me something I didn't think I'd ever feel again." His voice faltered. "Hope." Tears welled in my eyes. I realized how deeply I cared for him, and how scared I was to lose this fragile piece. "Thank you," I choked out. "I'll treasure it." We sat in silence, the weight of his gift settling around us like a promise. Then, from beyond the cottage walls, a distant rumble of engines drifted in, the phone calls we'd ignored catching up to us. Sebastian sighed. "Standing. Duty calls." I stood too, slipping the pendant around my neck. It rested over my heart, warm against my skin. "We'll face it together," I said, offering my hand. He took it and squeezed. "Together," he echoed. As we walked toward the car, I felt a quiet strength bloom inside me. The future was uncertain, but with his secrets shared and mine still safe in my own heart, I knew I could face whatever came next, hand in hand with a man who showed me how to live again. The convertible hummed along the highway as we drove back toward the city. Morning light danced across the dashboard, but my mind was heavy. Sebastian glanced at me, worry in his eyes. "I know the week ahead will be busy," he said softly. "Are you ready?" I drew a steady breath. "I am," I replied, surprised at my own confidence. The pendant rested against my chest, a steady reminder of our promise. When we reached his headquarters, I felt a flutter of nerves. The lobby was vast, all chrome and glass, with assistants hurrying between meetings. Sebastian led me through a maze of corridors until we arrived at a glass-walled office overlooking the city. His team, sharp suits and serious faces, stood and offered polite smiles. "Everyone, this is my partner," he said, his voice warm. My cheeks flushed as I waved shyly. A few nodded, a couple watched curiously. He guided me to a leather sofa. "Feel at home," he encouraged. I sank into the cushions, feeling small among the polished tables and bright monitors. He slipped into the chair behind his desk and turned on his laptop. "I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, he said, opening a folder of documents. "Do you want to stay, or would you rather wait in my office?" I hesitated. I wanted to support him, but part of me worried I would only slow him down. Then I thought of all he had done for me, how he had shown me kindness when I was broken. "I'll come," I decided. The boardroom was filled with important faces: investors, partners, executives. I took a seat at the far end. Sebastian introduced me with a quiet, "Thank you for being here." My heart pounded, but I met each gaze with a steady nod. The meeting began. Charts flashed on the screen, numbers and forecasts filled the air. I followed as best I could, leaning in when Sebastian whispered explanations. At one point, an older director cleared his throat and asked, "Mr. Cole, who is your guest?" Sebastian stood, placing his hand lightly on my shoulder. "This is someone very dear to me," he said. His eyes met mine. "She's the reason I work so hard." The room fell silent. Then, to my surprise, the director smiled. "Welcome to the team, Ms.?" I blinked, then said, "Just call me Anna." The director nodded, and the room relaxed. Suddenly, I felt a warm glow of acceptance. After the meeting, Sebastian led me to his corner office. He poured us both water and sat beside me. "You were amazing today," he said. "Thank you for sitting through all that." I smiled. "You make it easy to be here." I reached for his hand. He squeezed it. "I want you in my world, but only if you want to be." I glanced at the city skyline beyond the windows and then back at him. "I do," I said. "Because you're in mine." He pulled me close, and we sat together, two hearts facing the future. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, we had found a place where love and ambition could grow side by side. And for the first time, I knew our story could withstand the world's demands, even as it continued to shine. Life with Sebastian began to feel like a dream I never wanted to wake up from. Days passed in a warm blur, lunches at rooftop restaurants, shared books, long conversations that stretched into the night. He made time for me, even when he was drowning in work. I found myself slowly healing. But just as I started to trust the happiness, a shadow from my past returned. I was at a small cafe downtown, waiting for Sebastian. The place was quiet, cozy, full of the scent of baked bread and cinnamon. I was stirring my tea absent-mindedly when I looked up, and froze. "Andrew." He stood across the room, holding a coffee, looking just as shocked to see me. His hair was shorter, his suit a little wrinkled, but those eyes, I recognized the way they widened. "Anna," he said, walking toward me. My breath caught. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, always with words I'd never spoken. But now I just stared numb. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded, too stunned to object. He lowered himself into the chair, his hands shaking slightly as he set down his cup. "You look good," he said. "Happy." I gave a small smile. I am. He sighed. I've been thinking about you. A lot. He glanced down, then back up. Anna, I made a mistake. My heart twisted, but I stayed quiet. When I ended things, I thought I was doing the right thing, he said, voice trembling. I panicked. I didn't know how to handle commitment. But I've changed. I've had time to think, to grow. I placed my cup down, gently. Andrew, you hurt me. I know, he said quickly. And I'm sorry. I had to say it. I miss you. If you'll let me, I want to make it right. I shook my head slowly. It's too late. He looked stunned. You've moved on. Yes. My voice was firm now. I'm with someone who didn't wait until I broke to realize my worth. Andrew opened his mouth, but then he saw the pendant around my neck. His face fell. Is it serious? I met his gaze. It's real. He looked down, nodding, his jaw tightening with regret. Then, I hope he treats you better than I did. I stood up, heart steady. He already does. Sebastian entered the cafe just then, his eyes scanning until they found mine. He smiled, but it faded slightly when he saw Andrew rising from my table. Everything okay? He asked, coming to my side. I nodded. Yes, everything's just fine. I took Sebastian's hand as Andrew gave me one last look, then walked away. As we stepped outside, Sebastian asked gently, That was him, wasn't it? I didn't lie. Yes, but he's part of my past now. He looked at me, serious and calm. And I'm your present? I squeezed his hand. And maybe my future, too. His smile returned, wider now. Then let's keep walking forward. Together. And we did. Not running from the past, but walking boldly into something better. Sebastian stood beside me, his hand wrapped gently around mine. He looked nothing like the intimidating billionaire the world knew. Here, under the stars, he was just a man in love. And I was just a woman who had once been broken, now whole again. But getting to this moment hadn't been easy. After the cafe encounter with Andrew, I found myself battling a whirlwind of emotions. Even though I had made peace with the past, his sudden reappearance forced me to reflect. There was a time when I would have done anything to hear him say he was sorry. To know I mattered enough to be missed. But life has a strange way of showing you what you truly deserve. Sebastian never asked me to explain what had happened that day. He simply wrapped his arms around me that night and said, You don't owe anyone anything. Not even your past. And with that, I let go of the final thread tying me to the woman who once begged to be loved. I started to bloom. I took painting classes on weekends, volunteered at a shelter in the city, and even opened a small studio where I taught art therapy to women recovering from emotional trauma. Sebastian funded the project quietly, never once taking credit. He said it was my thing, my light. People began to talk about the billionaire who was rarely seen at parties anymore, who now smiled more often and attended little gallery openings with a woman the media hadn't figured out yet. We didn't rush things. Despite the rumors and the attention, we took our time, learning each other's hearts in quiet corners of the world. We traveled, Paris, Morocco, Cape Town. We sat by oceans and watched sunsets, made playlists together, danced in hotel rooms wearing pajamas. He told me about his parents, how he still spoke to them when he was alone. I told him about my childhood, the good and the sad parts. He listened like every word mattered. There were moments of doubt, of course. Some nights I would stare at him while he slept and wonder if this was real. If I was allowed to have this much peace after so much pain. Do you ever feel like it's too perfect? I asked him one night, curled up beside him on the sofa. He chuckled, brushing my hair from my face. Not perfect, just right. And I'm not letting it go. Neither was I. One morning, about a year after we met, he invited me to a charity gala. I didn't want to go at first. I still struggled with attention, with being seen. But he gently insisted. It's important to me, he said. Because you're important to me. So I said yes. I wore a flowing gold dress. My hair was pinned back, and I wore the silver feather pendant he had given me, my quiet source of strength. The event was held in a historic hall with marble columns and chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. I felt eyes on me the entire evening. Some were curious, others judgmental. A few seemed genuinely kind. But none of them mattered when Sebastian held my hand and introduced me, not just as his guest, but as the woman who changed my life. We danced under the lights, and when the music slowed, he leaned in and whispered, "Let's get out of here." I smiled. "Where to?" "You'll see." He drove us to the hill where we first watched the sunrise together, months ago when my world had just begun to shift. It was quiet now, just the two of us and the stars above. Sebastian stepped out, then came around to open my door. I took his hand, confused but smiling. Then he reached into the car and pulled out a small box. My heart stilled. He dropped to one knee, right there in the grass, under the vast sky we once dreamed beneath. "I knew from the moment I saw you, Anna," he said, voice trembling. "I knew when I held you that night in the rain. I knew when you looked at me like I was more than what the world sees. I don't want a perfect life, I want one with you in it. All the flaws, all the joy, all the mornings and arguments and laughter. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "Yes. Yes." He slipped the ring on my finger, a simple gold band with a diamond as bright as the stars above. We kissed, and the wind carried our laughter into the night. And now, here we were, months later, celebrating our engagement in the garden behind his country house. All the people who mattered were here. Friends, colleagues, the women from my studio. Even my mum had flown in from home, crying as she hugged Sebastian and whispered something in his ear I couldn't hear. He laughed and kissed her forehead. "Are you happy?" Sebastian asked now, his voice low in my ear. I turned to him, blinking back tears. "I'm more than happy. I'm free." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the feather pendant again. I stared at it, confused. "You gave this to me," I said. "I'm giving it to you again," he smiled. "As a wife-to-be. As a woman who's been brave enough to love again." I clasped it tightly. "And you, Sebastian Cole, have been the miracle I never expected." The guests cheered as we walked toward the center of the garden. Sebastian raised his glass. "To love," he said, "and to second chances." I looked out at the smiling faces, then back at the man who had taught me that broken hearts can beat again. "To us," I said. And as the stars lit up the sky, I knew this wasn't just the end of a painful chapter. It was the beginning of a brand new story. Hey there, story lovers. If you want to add a little more magic, adventure, and heartwarming moments to your day, make sure you subscribe to the Daily Stories channel on YouTube. Join our community of dreamers and seekers of inspiration. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our new story every single day.